Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever in the world you are. I'm delighted that you've joined us here on Gemmological Live, and I hope this finds you in the peak of good health. My name is Charles Evans, and I work for Gemmological. My role is broad-reaching and encompasses a number of responsibilities, including the laboratory, IT and infrastructure, and a number of aspects of our general operations. We have a real treat for you today. We're going to be talking to the editor of our flagship title, the Journal of Gemmology. And we're speaking with the guru of gemmological writing, Mr. Brendan Laurs, from his office in California. Before we bring Brendan in, I am going to run through a brief history of our journal for those of you who are just discovering Gemmological. We've had a busy few weeks with our webinars. So let's take a look at this. What is the Journal of Gemmology? Well, it's Gemmology's flagship title. It is one of two that you get when you're a member. The first issue was in 1947. It has been running continuously since then, a very proud 73-year record. We have 4 issues a year, and there is a very distinguished list of about 45 associate editors who are all involved in the peer review of all the articles, and it is considered a membership benefit. Let us take a quick look at the very first issue. Let's step back to 1947. The editor then was Herbert Smith, who was the president of Gemmological from about 1942 to 1953, I think it was. He was preceded by William Bragg, the Nobel Prize winner. Herbert Smith has a classroom named after him here. He reinvented and improved the refractometer, and he wrote a seminal work that may be in some of your book collections, and if it's not, you should start looking for it. So that was Gemstones, which was first published in 1912. This issue is worth looking up, and I will be telling you shortly how you can all access it. It had a couple of very interesting articles, synthetic corundum being one of them, an article on pearls, and indeed discussions on the importance of honesty in descriptions, which is relevant to this day. But let us leap forward to 2013, and this was the year that Brendan joined us, and this was his first cover. So we look there at a couple of images from the Paul Getty Museum, the collection of intaglios and cameos there, and that was one of the featured articles. You can also see mention of our journal partner down there, one of our journal partners, SSEF. And that first issue, we'll ask Brendan a bit about that. There was also an article on vanadium bearing chrysoberyl, synthetic and natural, and tracing cultured pearls from farm to consumer, something which is relevant, particularly relevant, ever-growing relevance to this day. And then, hot off the press, the latest issue of our journal. Now, this is what we are really going to be quizzing Brendan on, and we look forward to talking about that. Now, just briefly, how do I get access to that journal? Well, firstly, you can become a Gemmological member. You do not need to have passed our courses, and if you do so, you will get, if you do join us, you will get printed copies and access to the online versions. Now, don't lose hope if you're not a member. The archives are open to everyone. There's free access to all issues that are more than 1 year old. Current issues we keep to members. All issues older than 1 year, they're easy to view on all platforms. They are downloadable, and very important for those of you doing research, for those of you who've been stuck at home with nothing to do, there's a searchable index on the website, and there is a data depository. I will explain both of those two things. Searchable index, what good is that? Well, actually, if you look in that PDF and you would do a search on anything that interests you, it could be a particular variety of garnet, for example, you will find results showing you which issues to look in to read articles on that. And then Brendan has taken it a step further with all those bibliographies you see below, where he has sorted things into specific categories. So if you are chasing articles and research on, for example, garnet or asterism, you can just open one of those PDFs and see all the references to it. It's a fantastic resource, and it takes an enormous amount of time to put all of this together. And then the final thing that I touched on there, and I said, do not forget, is our data depository. What is a data depository? Well, so much of the work and the research that Brendan receives is just too much to fit into 120 pages of a journal, and it needs to be put somewhere else. So, for example, our latest article, some of the extra research is in there, and I would encourage you all to take note of when you see there's a data depository link, and do come to the website and follow that up. So who makes it all happen? Well, for a start, Brendan Laurs coming up shortly. And we have a couple of very valuable partners who respect the importance of academic integrity. SSEF and AGL are also help to bring this all together. Now, without further ado, let us introduce Brendan. Brendan, are you there?
Here I am.
How are you?
Good. Nice to be here.
Yeah, good afternoon to you. You see there, I'm respecting your oh no, it's good morning, isn't it?
That's right. It's just after 9 in the morning here.
It's home time here in England.
Almost happy hour, huh?
Well, it is. And we're very happy to have you here for an hour or so. But thank you very much for joining us. We've had a fabulous few weeks of serious gemmology online with people like Julia Griffiths presenting our Wednesday webinars. And we're really, really happy to have you with us today for something that's a little different. Issue 2 for 2020 of the journal is currently in the post and winging its way out to our members. So we're going to have a few questions about that. And I think possibly just to introduce you to people who don't know you, could you perhaps tell us a little bit about your career so far and how you came to be a gemmologist, a science writer, and an editor?
Sure, yeah. Actually, I grew up near the world famous pegmatites in San Diego County, and it was there that I kind of spawned my interest in gemstones, and just through searching through the mine dumps for tourmalines and beryls and spodumene, things like this, I really enjoyed finding the stones, but eventually I decided there's got to be something more to this, and I was really interested in how they form. And I pursued those studies actually when I went to university, starting with a bachelor's degree at the University of California, Santa Barbara. I studied geology there and did a senior thesis on one of our tourmaline mines here, the Himalaya mine, which as some people may have heard of before, it's produced more tourmaline than all the other mines in San Diego County put together. Just an incredible prolific producer of beautiful stones, including pinks and greens and bicolors. And I did a little senior thesis there that looked at some of the mineralization and how it affected the wall rocks around the pegmatite. And then after that, went on to do a master's degree studies at the Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon. And the reason why I went there in particular was because they had a very interesting exchange program with geologists in Pakistan. And I had decided that it would be really interesting to go do some studies of the pegmatites in Pakistan that produce all kinds of gemstones, beautiful stones. And so I teamed up with OSU, and they set us up with a field guide and a porter and driver. And we went up into the Karakora Mountains and we studied some emerald-bearing pegmatites and also the Stocknala tourmaline-bearing pegmatite, also in the Karakoram range, and did some wonderful field work there, which ended up going into 2 different papers, one of which was associated with my master's thesis. And they were published in Canadian Mineralogist. So I definitely got a good experience with writing there, and learned how to write quite a bit also in my geology training at Santa Barbara, because you do a lot of report writing and a lot of assessing of data and bringing everything together and trying to make it meaningful and communicate the science in a way that's understandable to a broad audience, which is really what I'm continuing to do now with editing the journal. After studying with OSU, I then went on to work for a brief period of time with Kennecott Exploration, who had a colored gemstone initiative that was a rather short period that they were doing this, but until the money actually ran out. But during that time, I got some interesting field experience looking for Benitoite in one case,
Yes.
and also working on a project for Utah Red Beryl.
Okay, that's fascinating. That really is. What an incredible journey. We're
Yeah.
certainly very lucky to have you with us, Brendan.
Thank you. Yeah. And so then after that period with Kennecott, then I launched my more editing career
Yeah.
with at Gems and Gemmology at GIA, starting there as initially as an instructor to teach about mineralogy and geochemistry and the formation of gem deposits. I published an article on Benitoite, in fact, from my previous research in G&G, and then at the same time they needed a new editor, so I went over there to edit G&G and worked for them for 15 years. It's a wonderful experience. Traveled to many exotic localities around the world and looked at geology and gem production, mostly in Africa, but many other countries as well.
Okay. Could I just bring you back perhaps to Benitoite? Could you tell us a little bit about it and your hunt for that?
Sure, yeah.
It's California's state mineral, is it not?
Yeah, the state gemstone of California, and that is because California is the only place in the world that it's forming and known to form in commercially gem quality accessible type deposits. And there's only one deposit, the Benitoite Gem Mine. It's hosted by a serpentinite body within a blue schist, what's called a blue schist. It's an inclusion, if you will, within the serpentinite. So it's a rather small deposit. And these are very distinct the way they form. And so if you're going to try to find the world's second known deposit of commercial benitoite, you want to look for similar type of geology. So
Yes.
I was outfitted with a pan, like the old miners used to use, and a rock hammer and a field vest. And I went up into the mountains there in the Coast Range of California, where this geology occurs, and systematically was panning concentrates from the streams and looking for float coming down mountainsides in order to trace another benitoite deposit. And after a considerable amount of effort, I actually found another deposit. And as it turns out, it wasn't commercially successful, but it was a rediscovered deposit because it had been mined many decades ago. When I found the deposit, I found an old crowbar there, and that tipped me off immediately that it was mined previously on a hobby basis. And it turned out the person who found it, the secret kind of died with him. So
Yeah.
it lay there completely unknown for several decades until we rediscovered it.
Wow, fantastic. You've got to love the way people take these things to their graves rather than tell somebody else.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting. So the indicator minerals that you'd be searching for there, are they as obvious as for example, some of the indicator minerals that diamond geologists look for? You know, the pyrope garnets, the chrome diopside, those stick out quite clearly. Is it similar with benitoite?
In this case, not so much. They're quite unusual because you have minerals like neptunite, for example, and joaquinite that aren't actually even that stable in the weathering environment, so they don't travel very far. So we were looking for those as well as just benitoite itself. And again, benitoite also isn't that stable in the weathering environment. So if you find any of these, you know you've got to be close because they haven't gone far. And so that's pretty exciting. But the main thing that I found to be useful was to look for the altered rock that the benitoite forms in. It's a blue schist, which is a high pressure, low temperature metamorphic rock. And associated with the benitoite mineralization, there's a very specific type of alteration that occurs. And so once you learn to recognize that, it can help you follow that up to where the deposit's located and hopefully make a discovery.
It's very, very fine grained and unusual, that blue schist. I was looking at a bit of it the other day. I didn't realize it looks almost like a plaster. It's quite unusual, yeah, very unusual looking.
Yeah, it's like a laminated sort of silvery gray rock. So
yeah. Brendan, let us move on to your first issue for Gemme, that cover there with the pieces from the Paul Getty collection. Could you tell us a little bit about that first issue? Because I'm sure it came with the challenges of anything new, you know, things you couldn't change and or couldn't yet change, or the difficulties of working from California with a team in Europe, etc., etc. What can you remember about that first issue?
Well, I have to say, first of all, I was stepping into some really big shoes. Roger Harding had been the editor, and previous, as you'd mentioned, we've had some real gemmological luminaries. And so I was sort of entering that position with a great deal of trepidation. But fortunately, I was lucky enough to be working with Mary Berland, she was the production editor at the time. She had been working for the Journal in one capacity or another for more than 50 years. And she was just a wonderful person to work with, and very open and accepting of my coming on, and also anxious to share her knowledge on the history of the Journal and where we wanted to go with it. So she was also a member of Gemme's council, so it was a very good perspective that she brought to the Journal. And with her guidance, I was able to just hit the ground running. And she was actually the production editor at the time, meaning that she was doing all the design and all the layout. And so besides doing editing work, we were coordinating on that. And it really was a smooth transition after all.
Mary was one of those people who worked in the background, but she was an absolute titan for Gemme, not just the Journal, but the other title, Gems and Jewellery. She was organizing conferences. She was helping with administration and membership. She did a huge amount. So yeah, it's very nice of you to remember her in that way, because you guys could have had a fractious relationship with you seizing her baby from her and her being kind of upset by changes you might have wanted to institute.
Well, I think she was really happy to have the help. And also at the time, there really wasn't a lot of changes that I made when I first came in for that first issue. The main thing we did is we just added a conferences section that talked about some of the interesting new discoveries that have been reported at gemmological conferences around the world. We had several different conferences we reported on, and that was kind of a new thing for the Journal at that time. And then starting with the following issue is when we really broadened it a little bit more and introduced a bunch of new sections and tried to make it a little more accessible and widely read by a broad category of gemmologists around the world, with a variety of different languages and whatnot, that we could make it accessible and easier to read. As far as working from California, my authors are all over the world, so it's really it's pretty straightforward to go on email and once in a while, as necessary, a phone conversation or a WhatsApp, and correspond with whoever I need to talk to from wherever I am. And I've got myself set up within my home office with all my library and access to my files, and so it's really worked out quite well. And also the lack of interruptions of a regular office environment has been quite handy just to get work done, you know, when you need to. So.
You're away from it all.
Yeah,
no, I imagine that does help. That does help. But you've done a fantastic job, and you're always adding and changing things where new things come along, and we'll be covering a little bit of that and this is neatly bringing me into showing perhaps the latest issue. Can you see that there?
There it is.
There we go. So this is our latest cover, or your latest cover, and we're taking a look there at a fabulous photograph of a piece of carved Burmese amber. Brendan, can you tell us more about this image and the carving?
Sure. This image goes along with one of our feature articles on Burmese amber, and this particular carving is a nice example of a piece of Burmese amber that has two different types of amber within the same piece. So the artist very cleverly used this in his design, and where you see the sort of opaque looking material over the top is what they call root amber, and that's framing a piece of golden transparent amber. And that frame has been used by the artist who was inspired by a poem of a particular temple in China where you have a bridge that crosses a stream with some trees nearby that there's a man you can see on a boat crossing, passing through there. And it's just a wonderful pastoral scene of a bridge with the stream and tree that the artist has captured using the natural features of this particular piece of Burmese amber.
So you mentioned a root amber. Now, root is not a term I'm familiar with in the description of amber. I think we've all heard perhaps of beeswax used to describe, for example, some of the Baltic amber that we see. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the terminology used in this article?
Yeah, the terminology was actually probably one of the most challenging aspects of this article, because the article was written by a team of Chinese authors from the China University of Geosciences in Wuhan, and they were basing a lot of their terminology on the particular wording that's used after translating into English from when you're trading in Burmese amber in China. And so we had to then take that terminology and kind of translate it, if you will, into terminology that we're used to hearing about in English, or at least define what these different terms mean that they use in their trade.
Okay.
So we have, for example, Burmese amber that's been called beeswax, like you mentioned for Baltic. They also use that same term. But then you have this term root amber, which refers to kind of a concentrically zoned, opaque series of layers that are created by microbubbles in the amber structure, actually. And those are just two of the varieties that they have there. And in addition, yeah, there's some pictures of some of those varieties.
I don't know how well people can see that, but
yeah,
very...
on the left there. And then in addition, you have some sub-varieties that are created by optical effects, like what they call oil gloss, which is a surface-related fluorescence effect that causes a strange appearance in certain lighting, and also a phosphorescence effect, which they call glow in the dark. So the first step on this article was really to kind of wrap my head around what the different varieties were, and then to kind of present those to the readers so that they understand what we're dealing with, and then look at the samples that were available and then figure out what analysis were done on which samples that tell us about the gemmological properties of this material. So that's the basis of the article. And Burmese amber is really well known by many people for its fossils. This particular article doesn't focus as much on the fossils. It does include the inclusions, some of the other features that you see in the Burmese amber in the form of inclusions, but a lot of it focuses on luminescence and spectroscopy and some of the other factors that gemmologists might find interesting from a purely like material characteristic type of function. So
okay, the article discusses time-resolved phosphorescence as one of the important techniques they used. Now, it is not covered in much depth in any gemmological or gemmology courses, and I have certainly not heard of it being used in amber. So these guys are really breaking new ground with this.
Yeah, this was a technique that you don't typically see in gemmology used. They got the idea of using it because, interestingly enough, when you look at the amber in the dark after switching off a bright light, it does show phosphorescence, but it's very quick. So maybe from a half second to 1 second or something, there'll just be a little bit of phosphorescence before it fades. So you're not even sure you see it in a way, because your eyes may be still adjusting to the darkness as the phosphorescence is fading. But they used a spectroscopy technique to capture the phosphorescence, and also looked at what particular wavelength excites the phosphorescence most efficiently in order to measure that. And then based on that, they characterize what's happening, but also they were able to make some inferences about some of the organic compounds that are present in the amber, and that shows you a little bit more about the characteristics of the amber that results from its composition.
Okay, that's really interesting, and it'll be it'll be interesting to see in the future who picks up this technology to perhaps test other things. I mean, you know, we all know that diamonds are certainly an area where there has been some research done, but there must be a number of others, other gem types out there that could do with a bit of study. So we look forward to seeing more on that. That's really, yeah, really most interesting. Cultured pearls from Abu Dhabi. Now that is the second feature article, and I understand the industry out there. This is a relatively new venture. Can you give us some background to it?
Yeah, they've been trying to culture pearls in the Gulf region for many, many years now, but only fairly recently they've gotten some success commercially, where they've produced enough that can be entered, you know, into the market. They haven't quite entered the market yet, but they are doing some pilot studies. The interesting thing is this is the first time that they've used a particular mollusk that's native to that area, Pinctada radiata, to do the culturing. And it's a rather small mollusk compared to what we're used to seeing. It may only be you know, so big, but then compared to the regular mollusks, which are this big, it's much more challenging to do the operations and inserting the beads and whatnot. But they've been able to overcome those hurdles, and now they're producing some beautiful pearls that are cultured in colors ranging from silver to gold mostly. And these are the first time in this article that they've been characterized gemmologically from this particular mollusk.
Now, the mollusk you refer to, Pinctada radiata, hasn't been used or isn't really known for being used in pearl cultivation. But historically, it is the source of the Gulf's natural pearls. Is that correct? So it is native to that region.
Source. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and that area typically has valued natural pearls. So this is quite an interesting development where you have cultured pearls being produced in that area with the same mollusk that's historically been mined or been producing natural pearls.
Yes, that's going to be very interesting to see how they bring these to market in a region where a lot of places, I think, for example, of Bahrain, where they're very proudly defending the natural pearl and trying to bring trying to maintain a marketplace for that is pure, if you like, or clean. It's going to be interesting to see how these do come to market.
Yeah, and one particular challenge that is faced here is as a byproduct of culturing these beaded pearls, you do have some non-beaded pearls that are produced. Some people call these keshi type pearls in the past, and they're very difficult to tell apart from natural pearls without, you know, being in a well-equipped gemmological lab. So it's going to be important that they're adequately characterized. And this article is sort of the first step in looking at their properties as well as the beaded materials that are being produced.
Terrific. That's a very interesting article. Our next one, which I'd like to talk a little bit about, is the diamonds from the Suriname region. Now, I think that is really interesting. I'm going to bring up an image here of the region, because I know Suriname is perhaps not something, not a country everyone could immediately put their finger on, but that gives everyone an idea where this is. So it's Venezuela to the northwest and Brazil to the south, and it is flanked by Guyana, which was formerly British Guiana, and French Guiana, and Suriname was a Dutch colony. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and I think we all know that there has been historically, in fact, I have, when I saw the article, I walked past this in the library, which in the Gemme library, which is a book written in the 1920s by a young British lady who went out to British Guiana to search for diamonds as part of an operation out there. So it is particularly interesting to see 100 years on, somebody else has picked up the mantle on the opposite side of Suriname, and they're looking for these diamonds there.
Yeah,
Can you?
the diamonds are there in this whole region have been enigmatic, as they say, and that it's very difficult to find the actual primary sources of where they came from, since they are all mined from alluvial deposits, at least in Suriname and in some of these surrounding countries. Brazil, only recently, they've been mining the kimberlites that they traced down as a result from a lot of exploration work. But in Suriname, the diamonds there have been known for a long time as well, but only small amounts have been found. And then more recently, there was some gold mining that took place on one of the creeks there, and they found several diamonds as a result of processing these gold mine alluvial sediments. And that's what spurred on this study. So the specific goal was to characterize the diamonds a little bit more than they'd been looked at in the past, and try to assess from their inclusions and other features maybe what type of primary rocks they might have come from their formation down in the Earth's mantle, and then looking at their subsequent eruption and the processes that occurred during their transport to the Earth's surface, in order to get a better idea of where they might look and what the
Mhm.
primary sources might be in that region.
Are they hoping to perhaps find something that's commercially viable, or do they think this is merely something interesting?
Well, it goes a little bit beyond academics, because there is a company there now that's actually doing some systematic exploration, and they are hoping to look at the deposits a little more seriously, even though they've been laying there pretty much with no one interested in them for many decades. So
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
very interesting.
The
That is,
diamonds are quite nice. They're high color and very transparent and attractive stones. So we'll see what happens.
that would be very interesting. Yes, there are sure to be a number of kimberlites in that area that have just, because it's all, or a lot of it is very dense jungle. So I
Hmm.
think a lot of these things will be quite difficult to find, because there'll be millions of years of soil and leaf litter and that sort of thing compacted over anything.
Hmm.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Now, I was going to move on and ask you a couple of questions about uh, Laurent Thomasite, which
Oh
is
yeah.
one of your gem notes. Now, I think I speak for everybody when I say the gem notes in the journal are always a fascinating source of little bits and pieces for us. So do tell us a little bit about Laurent Thomasite.
Well, this is an exciting development because it's a brand new mineral and it's also a gem. And that hasn't happened for a long time, because typically when you find a new mineral, you have to see it through a microscope. And if not a microscope, a scanning electron microscope, because they're so small. In this case, we've got some crystals that are up to a couple inches on the side, or a couple centimeters on the side. So they're good size, and some of them are transparent enough to facet, and they also happen to be of a hardness and a color that is attractive and useful for gems. So it's the magnesium analog of millarite, which is an unusual beryllium mineral. It's forming in a pegmatite in Madagascar, and this is the first time that they just characterized the new mineral, and a paper came out within just the past week or so in the European Journal of Mineralogy that gives the full mineralogical description. And a team of authors from Europe, headed by a gentleman from the French Natural History Museum in Paris, did the
Mhm.
characterization. They named it after a prominent mineral dealer named Laurent Thomas, and he's with a company called Polychrome France, and he's based in Madagascar, does a lot of work on the minerals of Madagascar, mostly for mineral collectors. And so I'm sure he's quite excited to have a mineral named after him. The mineral is interesting to gemologists because not only is it attractive enough to cut, which is very unusual for a new mineral, as I mentioned. The last time this happened was probably for pizodaite, which was another mineral discovered in Madagascar, and that was in 2003. In this case, it's a blue mineral, and it derives its color from iron intervalence charge transfer, and it's got very strong pleochroism. So in the normal direction, when you look at the crystal, it appears blue, but if you have a large enough crystal and look at it the other direction, it looks a nice yellow. So it's a distinct pleochroism, and it's because of the pleochroism, it's very easy to tell apart from millarite mineral that it normally is associated with. That's the other main mineral in the group, which is typically colorless to pale yellow.
Well, that's really interesting. That's really interesting because, well, I guess it would be nice if at some point we could drop one of those into one of the exam tests or exam sets for our diploma students. I don't think they'd appreciate it at all.
That would be pretty sneaky, yeah. I don't know how much of this we're going to see in the market. It's so far just one find, and it debuted for the very first time in Tucson at the February Tucson shows just this last February. And there was a few crystals available and a few cut stones, but this gem note shows that the material is out there. There were a couple of stones submitted to the lab in Thailand, the GIT lab, and they were the ones that did this initial gemmological characterization for the journal.
That's very interesting. I'll have to we'll have to have a look at next Tucson, which I certainly hope is not interrupted by all the trouble we've had this year.
Yeah.
And we'll see if some of that's come to the market and we could get hold of a sample. That'd be great to see. Now, another of your gem notes there was on something a little closer to home, and that's the green fluorite from the Weardale area of North England. And it's about the fluorescent qualities. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a beautiful material. It's been known for many decades amongst the mineral collector community, especially. Green fluorite, beautiful cubes, well formed, sometimes with interpenetrating twins, forming these nice mineral specimens. And more recently, they've been cutting some of this into gems. But the article that you're referring to, the authors actually were looking at the fluorescence, which is a very distinctive characteristic of this fluorite, in that it has such strong daylight fluorescence, it's blue, that it can create a beautiful overtone to the green fluorite specimens and give it this blue appearance that to this day is still not very well understood as to the reason why you have this bright green fluorite with this blue fluorescence. However, we do know that rare earth elements play a strong role in this, and the authors presented a variety of data, including UV-Vis spectrum and a Raman spectrum, that show characteristics that are very consistent with a series of rare earth elements that you would get colored centers as a result of this, they think. And the fluorescence has been fairly well conclusively linked back to these rare earth elements, whereas the green colors, they're still not sure exactly what the mechanism is, but it appears that they're related as well.
Okay. Every gemmology student is told that fluorite is too soft to be a practical gemstone for jewelry, but nonetheless, someone has bravely set forth and brought out a range of jewelry, which is also in a gem note, taking advantage of this gorgeous material. Can you comment on that? This is another new thing that appeared at last year's Tucson show, or I should say this year's Tucson show. And it's a company, UK Mining Ventures, they're the ones who are currently mining the deposit, and they've embarked on an initiative to cut this fluorite and then set it in an array of jewelry that using settings that protect the material because of its softness, Mohs hardness of 4. You got to handle it very delicately, but they're setting it in earrings and pendants and that type of settings that aren't experiencing a lot of wear, so that they can showcase the color and the interesting fluorescence properties of this material. Okay, it certainly looks gorgeous in the pictures. I really do think it's very unusual. It's an incredible. It almost does to green what Paraiba tourmaline does to blue. You know, it's a living electric green. It looks quite fabulous.
Yeah, it's a nice color, and also that they're doing custom cutting. So you're seeing a lot of concave cuts, for example. You're getting great light return and really sets off the material.
Interesting. Now, you have always made sure that the listings of books, events, and conferences are meticulously detailed in the journal. And I am sure it is a very laborious and thankless task, but you've always completed it with great attention to detail. You now do more. So in this latest issue, we have a couple of new categories of listings. Could you tell us about the webinars and the videos?
Sure, yeah. In our What's New section, we like to sort of present sort of the current status of what people can access online for education and continuing education, what's new. And in this case, because of the whole pandemic situation and the lockdown situation that many of us are still in, there's been a huge resurgence in webinars and online education for people who just have time and want to take their education to the next level. And so what we did is we just kind of went through and categorized everything we could find where there was archived content that you can still access. So in other words, not upcoming webinars, but things that have already been presented and that are still accessible for people who have the time and want to investigate a huge variety of topics that are available. And this is by no means a completely exhaustive list. It's just the main ones that we could find quickly before the deadline for that particular issue. And I think the readers will have a good time exploring these, and it's an evolving list. And with the sites that we pointed out, they continue to post new content. We've listed some examples of the types of things you can find there, but this is by no means all of the contents that have been covered.
I think we're enormously fortunate that these last few months have brought out a lot of creativity and imagination amongst a lot of people and made them take the brave step of coming out online, and they've made available to all of us an awful lot of fantastic material. And if it's sitting in YouTube channels where we can watch it at our own leisure, it makes up for that we've missed. So yes, it's great to have that. I am just taking a look to see if we've had any questions, and I can see, even though I know some of the people who are online, we have not been asked any difficult questions. We've been let off the hook there, but perhaps next time people will be a little braver and try and put you on the spot. But before we go, let me ask you, could you give us some teasers for the next issue? Because sure. I'm sure this is a never-ending task, and you're busy beavering away on the new issue.
The next issue was, yeah, we're definitely in production on that. I just finished editing an article that's quite unusual in that it describes the stereoscopy of gemstones, of starstones, and that there's an optical phenomenon that it makes the star or cat's eye effect in some stones appear to actually float off the surface of the stone, sort of float above it. You normally don't see this because the stones that you're used to looking at are so small. But in this case, they characterize a very large garnet. It's a 4-ray star garnet, and the cabochon weighs, I can't remember the exact amount, but it's in the thousands of carats. And you can actually see this effect with the star kind of appearing to float off the surface with the unaided eye. Capturing that, of course, in an article is difficult. So the authors have put together stereoscopic images, which are pairs of images that you then look at to resolve a 3-dimensional image. And then they put together an explanation as to why this happens using ray tracing and things. It's quite interesting. And this was actually dealt with many years ago in the journal in an initial article, and they've kind of built upon that study and expanded it a bit more for this large star garnet and also a star rose quartz. So it should be pretty interesting.
That sounds fascinating. I look forward to that. I really do. That really does sound interesting. Brendan, I have some bad news. A couple of questions have popped up. Are you braced for those?
Sure.
Shall we run through a few of them quickly?
Of course.
First, there's a question from somebody asking for tips on writing research articles and asking, are there any books per se on the writing of research articles? So I think this is probably somebody hoping to contribute at some point.
Sure. There are books that talk about that in general on academic writing. I don't have off the top of my head the names of any of them that I can recommend. But what I would suggest most of all is if you're interested in writing for a particular audience or a particular journal even, or a book or whatever, I would consult recent copies of that journal or types of works that are similar and just really get familiar with what those cover. And in technical writing in particular, there tends to be, for certain types of articles, sort of boilerplate outlines that are available that talk about, like, for example, you always want to have an abstract, which is the summary of your work, followed by like an introduction, followed by materials and methods, results, and discussion and conclusion, with, of course, references and figure captions. Those are kind of the skeletal parts of an article. And I would strongly suggest following that if you're interested in writing a full article, but it's much easier just to start with a shorter article. And so if you're interested, for example, in contributing to the journal, starting with a gem note would be a very logical thing to do, because you can do that quickly and fairly easily. It doesn't go through the peer review system, so it's edited for completeness and appropriateness and technical accuracy, but it doesn't go through the full peer review system, which makes it a much easier process to get through. So that would be basic. Also, we do have some outlines on hand that we can send that are sample outlines. And I should also mention that there's plenty of sample articles that we put online on GEMA's website. You can just go download those individual articles without even having to go to the archive and download complete issues. So there's a variety of ways to sort of gain access to what we've done for examples of recent things. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Well, I think there's a lot of useful, helpful information there for Annie. A couple of other questions here. What is the worst part of your day as an editor?
Well, there's no worst, right? They're all good. No, I would say, yeah, there are some challenges sometimes where you're having to edit an article, which is really difficult because of a language barrier, for one thing. When you're trying to get into an author's head to try to understand what it is they're saying, first of all, and then once you do that, then you have to turn that around and rephrase it in such a way that is understandable to a broad audience, many of which don't necessarily speak English as a first language. So it has to be put in accurate language, but also in language that's not too complicated and or too simple, for that matter. So that can be very difficult and very tiring. At the end of the day, you just kind of feel like, you've been run over sometimes. But by and large, that's the benefits of working with the wonderful people I work with, much more than make up for any drawbacks.
You're too nice, I'm sure. That segues kind of neatly into another question there from Raquel, asking, what are your favorite types of articles?
Oh, good. Yeah, my favorite types are locality articles, which are articles that document gem localities, mining areas, and particularly for colored stones. And that's sort of my own background with geology and looking at the formation of gems in the field and the mining techniques. And those types of articles I find to be the most interesting to edit as well as to write. Okay.
And let me just check time, because we've been told to run quite strictly according to time. Emmanuel has a question about making the journal, how it becomes a true scientific journal, how you push this forward and get it in all these places, all the correct libraries and on. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It dovetails in nicely with the recent recognition that the journal got last year with the Science Citation Expanded Index, which is the prominent index that scientists use to benchmark a journal. For example, once you're in that index, it shows that you have the credentials, the scientific credentials that are necessary for on a whole bunch of different levels for a technical journal. And the journal just last year entered that for the first time. And before that, we were in a slightly different index run by the same people, which is also a highly recognized index. So it's based on several different features, but was there a particular question you wanted to?
Well,
answer?
that answers the question, I think, and
Yeah,
it relates to another question there, which someone was asking about the impact factor. So I'm
right.
sure the impact factor depends on your categorization.
Yeah, it's an interesting, there's a chicken and the egg scenario here, because in order to get into these databases, you have to have a high enough impact factor. And the impact factor, what it is it's a measure of the amount of times that articles in your journal are cited in other journals that are covered by those databases.
Hmm.
So in order to be even considered for these databases, you have to have a sort of over a certain threshold of citations where it's really not considered worthwhile for them to take their time to go through the indexing process. And the Journal of Gemmology is just going to be getting an impact factor hopefully soon, because we were accepted into the database last year, and then it takes a full year for them then to tabulate all the citation data. And so the following year is when the impact factor comes out. So as soon as we get that information, we'll be putting that on our homepage for everybody to see. I don't expect we're going to have a high impact factor, because gemmology is a niche science, and
Yes.
we're not highly cited by a lot of other journals that are covered in these databases, especially in the realm of physics and chemistry and other earth scientists. But it'll be nice to have that impact factor finally.
Well, I think you've been doing a fantastic job lifting the journal up and bringing it towards that. But it is an uphill battle. You just need to look at any given country and see how many universities offer degrees in geology and earth sciences unrelated to gemmology.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see why those journals are more attractive to a lot of, or it's easier for a lot of those journals. They have a bigger pool with more fish, and it's yeah, you have a tough job, and I think you do it very well for us. A lighter question here, just to finish up with, because I think we're pushing 55 minutes. Sarah is asking, have you had any issues with political situations making you pull an article, or have to I suppose having to make political considerations in the publishing of articles, maybe to do with areas where people can no longer travel to, or maybe you're getting pressure to publish or not to publish, depending on things, I suppose, not necessarily political, but also commercial interests might not want you to say things.
Yeah, no, so far, actually, in my career with the journal, I haven't had that really happen. Thank goodness. That would make things very complicated. I think the most interesting thing that's happened recently related to our current pandemic situation is I had an article that I had planned for the last issue that we actually did have to pull because one of the authors, unfortunately, came down with the virus. And that author is okay now, but it certainly threw a wrench in the whole production of that article. And so we're going to look at publishing that in another future issue now that the author has recovered. So it's interesting to see something more personally, directly impacting the journal related to the virus.
Gosh, yeah, that sounds dreadful, but I'm glad they've recovered, and we look forward to reading that article. Brendan, I think we should wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time today, and congratulations on the completion of yet another incredible issue of the Journal of Gemmology.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And to everybody out there who's tuned in and listened in, thank you for your interest. And we would ask that if you would like to drop us a line, please do email Brendan at editor@gem-a.com, or email the membership. And I am just bringing those up there. I think you should all be able to see them. Can you? And thank you so much, everybody. And we'll call this a wrap. Thanks a lot. Take care. Thank you, Brendan. Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.